All right, it's time. I've been putting it off, but now we are going to dive into the lawsuit between Tati Westbrook and Katie Joy Paulson. Now, lots of coverage has already occurred on this lawsuit and not much on this channel. I had one interview with Emily Baker in a live stream, and she has been covering this extensively. She is a lawyer. She has lots and lots of experience, and you should check her out. I've got her channel linked in the description below, and I've got a link to that live stream interview that will pop up at the end of this video. So go check that out, okay? That will give you some background on what's going on, especially if you check out Emily's discussions on the topic. We are going to cover a very limited portion of this case today, and this is in the most recent document filed by Tati Westbrook, which is her opposition to Katie Paulson's motion to dismiss. Katie Paulson, by the way, is known as Without a Crystal Ball on YouTube and Twitter. So she is a YouTuber, and she has done extensive amounts of videos on Tati Westbrook. Something like 80 videos are alleged. Not all of the videos are available. Some are deleted. There's a whole bunch of drama going on around this lawsuit, and there's not enough time to get into it. If you're watching this, you probably already know. But anyway, let's talk about this jurisdictional argument. So, in the motion to dismiss filed by Katie Paulson, she says the court shouldn't hear this case for this reason, this reason, this reason. One of those reasons is jurisdiction. The court doesn't have the authority to hear this case because it doesn't have authority over me, Katie Paulson. I am in Minnesota. This court is in Washington. Specifically, it's in federal court in Washington State. It's in Washington, so they do not have the authority to reach from Washington into Minnesota to hold a judgment over me. Therefore, this is the wrong forum. This case should be dismissed, and they should figure out what the right forum is, okay? So that is one of the questions surrounding this. And that's what we're going to talk about today. Does the court have this jurisdiction? And we're going to present Tati Westbrook's argument. And the reason I'm picking Tati Westbrook's argument is because, one, I don't think Katie Paulson did a very good job of arguing it in her motion to dismiss. And two, I do think that the argument favors Katie Paulson, which is part of why that document is so weirdly bad. But Tati Westbrook is going to make a really strong effort here. And so we're going to talk about what that personal jurisdiction is, why it matters, and how a court finds it. And then I'm going to show you the argument of Tati Westbrook. We're going to burn through it real quick, and then that will kind of give us an idea of what the court is going to be looking at. Now, I don't think the court should have jurisdiction based on what I've seen. And I'll talk about why in a second. But that is my initial opinion. That doesn't mean that the court doesn't have jurisdiction. It doesn't mean that. And it doesn't mean they're going to rule that way. So please don't take my personal opinion about it, my legal opinion about it, as what will happen. That is not what I'm saying. I'm not making a prediction because this is a complicated question and the facts are never as basic as they are in the theory, okay? So here is the theory. Here is the theory. Again, Katie Paulson has to do something to be under the jurisdiction of Washington State. This would be really simple if Katie was just in Washington. If she were in Washington, as in a resident of Washington, Washington would have jurisdiction over her. Very simple. She's getting the advantages of Washington's laws, whatever those may be. Therefore, she is subject to Washington's legal authority. Now, if one is not a resident of a state, then there's a general personal jurisdiction that can be made through something called sufficient contacts with the forum being the state in this case, the state of Washington. And this is a civil procedure case. It is a long-standing case, and most of this law comes from a decision called International Shoe. You can just Google International Shoe, and you'll find the decision. You can probably find all sorts of articles written about it, but let me summarize it down for you very quickly. You have to do enough to request the power of the state on sort of a regular or repeated basis to then have the state's authority over you. Again, if you're in the state living there, you're obviously under the continuous authority of the state. If you just drive through it once, like you're on a highway and you go through Washington state on route to some other state, you're only under its authority for the time that you're there. Even if you stop at a gas station and go to the bathroom and buy some donuts or whatever, but then you drive on, you're really not under their authority. Even if you take a vacation there, you're under their authority while you're there. Outside of that, most people are not, because it would be ridiculous for Washington to try and extend its laws upon you while you're not there, while you don't live there, and while you have no contact. So, what is a forum contact? Well, a forum contact would be something like a business contact. Now, let's say you own a chain of restaurants, for example, and one of your restaurant's locations is in Washington. Well, now you have forum contacts because you are expecting Washington to extend the protection of its laws to your business, as well as subjecting the business to the regulatory schemes. Is this enough for the owner of a business to have enough forum contacts to be under the jurisdiction? Different question. Don't know. But this is an example of a forum contact. Other forum contacts would be anytime you invoke the jurisdiction of the state. If you're suing people in Washington state, for example, if you're suing multiple people in that state, you are invoking the protection of the jurisdiction and invoking its laws. That might be sufficient. The question under international shoe is, do you have enough sustained contacts to the state? And there isn't a bright line rule on what it is. Sometimes it's really obvious. Other times it's not so obvious. So if that is the general personal jurisdiction standard, and Tati will make an argument that Without a Crystal Ball does have this due to subscribership and stuff like that. I don't think it's that strong of an argument, but they do a good job making it, okay? That's the part we're going to talk about. We'll see what the judge ends up saying about that as we go. Now, the other question is a specific personal jurisdiction. So let's say you don't have the general jurisdiction because you don't generally reach in. But remember when I talked about driving through, right? If you target your actions at the forum state, specifically your tortious actions at the forum state, then they may have specific jurisdiction over those actions. And this is one of the other arguments Tati will make, and that this is that Katie Paulson has targeted her defamatory comments, her defamation, into the state of Washington to damage Tati and her husband in the state of Washington. Okay, so this is saying, I mean, she might be in Minnesota, but she is leaving effectively Minnesota to do damage to us here virtually over the internet, right? I don't think they ever alleged that she specifically went to Washington state to do any of this stuff, but rather that they're projecting their tortious acts into the state of Washington, and that should give the court jurisdiction over them in regards to at least those acts, if the court does not have general jurisdiction. All right? This is a very, very difficult thing to prove on something like YouTube. And the argument that the Westbrooks make is basically that Paulson has subscribers that watch their show and contribute to them or whatever from the state of Washington, who live in the state of Washington, and that is therefore them projecting acts into the state of Washington. That has not flown as a basic finding of specific jurisdiction when something is broadcast everywhere. You have to show that they specifically targeted Washington and not that people who watch or consume a product happen to be in Washington. Those are two really, really different things, and those two really, really different things will make the difference between jurisdiction and not jurisdiction. Okay, so that's the basic rundown. Let's look at their arguments. We're going to read through them quickly, and then we'll talk a little bit about what I think, okay? Defendants Katie Joy Paulson's and Without a Crystal Ball's content about plaintiffs demonstrate forum contacts. I think this is tenuous, but here we go. Defendants Paulson and Without a Crystal Ball announced their campaign of harassment against Tati and their plan to dig into her background and expose her in a video uploaded to YouTube on or about May 31st, 2019. In that video, defendants state they were digging into Tati's background and looked all over the place, everywhere. Defendants also reference civil judgments and tax liens that they found. Defendants then go on to indicate that they conducted more in-depth searches than a simple background check. Defendants also state that people, quote, can actually go state to state and try to pull stuff up. Of course, states have websites that you have access to public records and court records included in that. That is true. You can get property records, all sorts of things. And that people can go, quote, to the different databases within each of these states to find information, which defendants admit is what they did to get personal information regarding Tati and her family. Defendants also assert that Tati's, quote, address is online too, but defendants were, quote, not going to provide that. Defendants further state that they continued, quote, digging through more and more information, going through marriage records and birth certificates, specifically asserting it was weird that they could not find Tati's birth certificate. Tati was born in Washington. Defendants then go on to discuss the extensive public records and social media pages they searched regarding Tati's parents, Washington residents, and her two sisters. One is a Washington resident, lamenting about how they could not find information regarding Tati's father, which led defendants to theorize that Tati's father is either dead or in the mafia. Come on! Don't make me laugh! I'm trying to read fast. Okay, so what they're doing is they're asserting that these searches, these reaching into the public databases, is Katie Paulson personally availing herself of the benefits of Washington state's government property, right? Public records access. You know, public records access is generally controlled and authorized under state statute. They decide how these public records will be handled, what will be public, what will be confidential, and the manner in which citizens, private citizens, can access these public records. Okay, so they're arguing that by Katie reaching into Washington state to avail herself of the publicly available records, that she is exercising sufficient forum contacts with the state of Washington to have jurisdiction. I disagree. I disagree that this is the case, but it is an interesting argument. It is an interesting argument, and it may be sufficient. I mean, the argument for Tati Westbrook here is that she is using Katie Paulson is using a state apparatus of Washington state specifically to find this information. She's intentionally looking into Washington. I don't think that's what the forum contacts under International SHU are about, but we'll see what the judge says. Subsequently, in a video entitled The Past James and Tati Westbrook Don't Want You to Know, uploaded to YouTube on or about June 2nd, 2019, defendants continue their campaign of harassment and planned expose of Tati and her family. In that video, defendants discuss the research they have done into Tati's childhood and family in Washington. Defendants also specifically talk about Tati's two sisters and mother, who are private Washington citizens. They further examine Tati's personal history in Washington and connections to Washington. Defendants also assert that they have documentation for all the information in this video, including court records from Washington state that they found through 3 weeks of nonstop research to find all of this information. Defendants even show a public document confirming that Tati and James's residence was in Washington at the time of the video. In the document, defendants expressly redacted the house number, street, and city of Tati and James's Washington address, but left the state designation, which was Washington. They're trying to demonstrate here that the defendant knows that they're in Washington, because what they want to do is show that the defendant is intentionally reaching into Washington, that she can't claim ignorance about where the Westbrooks are or anything like that, because she knows they're in Washington and has done all of these things to show that she knows, and also, in at least some instances, to hide where they actually are or to prevent the disclosure of personal information, okay? In the video, defendants claim, quote, they don't want to put Tati and James's address out. They don't want to show their viewers like where Tati and James live. At the end of the video, defendants thank their viewers for, quote, for sticking with them in their two-part expose, and if they uncover more information, they will deliver it to the viewers. More recently, in a video uploaded on YouTube on or about September 22nd, 2020, defendants admit that Tati and James moved back to Seattle actually a while ago. Defendants reference Tati and James's purchase of a house in Los Angeles. However, during the entire time they owned that Los Angeles home, neither Tati nor James lived in Los Angeles or even spent a single night in said Los Angeles house. Since May 2019, defendants have published approximately 80 videos as well over 100 internet postings on Twitter and other social media maligning Tati, James, and Halo. Halo is the business owned by Tati and James. Okay, so that is their forum contacts, right? They're saying that Katie Paulson is intentionally reaching into Washington. She knows she's reaching into Washington. She's looking in Washington for these Washington people. Washington, Washington, Washington. Get it in the head of the court that this is actually happening in Washington, even though Katie is going to say she's from Minnesota and couldn't possibly be under Washington law, right? Like, that's the goal. And again, I don't think these are the general forum contacts that International Shoe contemplates. Personally, the judge may disagree, and we'll see what happens at that point. Now, they're going to allege more specific contacts. That was for general jurisdiction. Now they're going to allege more specific tortious acts being directed to Washington in this next section. Defendants' Washington viewership and plaintiffs' harm in the forum. Defendants' viewership includes residents of Washington, and contrary to the misleading statements in Paulson's declaration, defendants know their content is published to viewers in Washington. Do you, though? I mean, maybe. During multiple live stream videos in August and September 2020, 3 to 4 months before the filing of Paulson's declaration, Washington residents expressly identified their Washington locations to defendants in the live stream chat. But that's still on the internet. Those are statements made by people that you may or may not know, and that doesn't necessarily mean you actually know they're there. In addition, in a live stream video dated August 30th, 2020, defendants specifically interrupted the live stream to acknowledge that they said hello to Patricia from the state of Washington. Moreover, defendants' publication of their harassing and defamatory content about Tati, her family, and her business to Washington viewers caused such viewers to stop supporting Tati. Okay, real quick, this part requires an aside. There are 2 included declarations with this that are from supporters or former supporters of Tati Westbrook's channel. One is a declaration of a former viewer who said that Katie Paulson's videos specifically made them stop viewing Tati's content and made them stop purchasing Halo products. All right? So that is alleging specific damage in the forum from someone who was a supporter. They have to establish this. Now, of course, that is very self-serving. And it's weird that a former supporter who doesn't like them would provide an affidavit saying so, but they must be back to being a supporter now. That's what one would think, right? So that's the idea there. And then there is another affidavit from someone talking specifically about one of Katie's biggest fans, loyalist fans, something like that, who is shown to be a Washington resident. And the claim there is that Katie Paulson knows that this person is a Washington resident, that they are a Washington resident. Here's the problem with this argument in general. Knowing that someone is in the state of Washington and you're publishing your content on YouTube, which is a global platform, does not mean that you're targeting the state of Washington with your publications. Now, if you did a video that said this video is targeted to the state of Washington, I guess maybe that would kind of qualify, but it doesn't automatically qualify. YouTube is a global publishing platform. It does not allow you to specifically target a state and exclude others or anything like that. So just knowledge that some of your business is done in Washington does not mean that you're intentionally doing it. Now, if you're taking out ads in Washington to get people in Washington to watch your videos, different story. That isn't alleged as far as I've seen. But mere knowledge that some of your people may be in Washington isn't enough. And once you get to a certain size, and it's not that big, you can assume that you have viewers in basically every state. Just having a couple thousand viewers, other than having a really targeted specific audience on a narrow field that's related to one state, you're probably going to have viewers in all 50 states very, very quickly. All right? But that being said, we'll move on. Moreover, defendants' publication of their harassing and defamatory content about Tati, her family, and her business to Washington viewers caused such viewers to stop supporting Tati. One of the reasons Washington viewers watched Tati was because she was from Washington. That's from the declaration as well. They stopped ordering Tati's Halo products, they stopped watching Tati's monetized YouTube channel, and they stopped following Tati's social media, which damaged Tati's, James, and Halo's business interests. In addition, defendants' Tati-related content caused Washington residents to think less of and develop negative feelings towards Tati, James, and Halo. That may be true. The question is not whether that happened, but whether they targeted Washington in the attack. And again, even if Washington doesn't have jurisdiction, somewhere else does. Minnesota would have jurisdiction over this. Federal court in Minnesota would have jurisdiction over this as well, because Paulson is in Minnesota. That would be the easiest alternative. So if the judge does dismiss this for lack of jurisdiction, they can refile this most likely in the state of Minnesota or in the federal court in Minnesota and allege the same sort of stuff. Minnesota does not have an anti-SLAPP statute, so it would probably be pretty similar, and they maybe should have thought about that before, but Minnesota would be less convenient than Washington State, therefore it might not be the best choice. Finally, Tati's and James's Washington residence. Tati and James moved back to Washington from California in late 2018, signing an 18-month lease agreement for their current residence, with the lease term beginning December 1st, 2018. The lease term was then extended to March 31st, 2021. In fact, Tati's Instagram account, Glam Life Guru, has a picture of Tati in their current residence, which was posted on February 18th, 2019. Tati and James paid taxes in Washington for the 2019 tax year and will pay taxes in Washington for the 2020 tax year. They owned investment property in Washington, and their personal bank accounts are located in Washington. Additionally, Tati and James have 3 businesses incorporated in Washington: Tati Inc., Tati Halo Inc., and Tati Cosmetics Inc. The Washington citizenship of these companies are publicly available and easily found in Washington Secretary of State's online database. All 3 corporations also have business bank accounts in Washington. Tati and James do not own any property in California. Tati is the chief executive officer of Halo and manages nearly all of Halo's businesses in Washington through her Washington corporation, Tati Halo. Likewise, James is the chief operating office of Halo. They need an R on office to make it officer. The reason they're doing this is because one of the allegations, as I mentioned before, is that one of the does is a former business partner of James Westbrook. And if that former business partner, who's alleged to live in, I believe, California, were to be found to be similarly situated to a business or one of the parties, Tati or James, in California, that would defeat the diversity jurisdiction of the court, okay? So if he's in California, they're in Washington, and the other defendant, Katie Paulson, is in Minnesota, everything's fine. If one of the corporations is in California and he is in California and he should be a defendant, then they no longer have diversity jurisdiction and the federal court can't hear it at all. They're arguing out the gate that this is not the case. Everything they do is in Washington. They don't own anything in California. So if this guy's in California, TFB, he's diverse from them. Tati has over 9 million subscribers on YouTube, approximately 2.5 million followers on Instagram, and approximately 1.3 million followers on Twitter. She does not manage her social media accounts on her own, and many of her social media posts are created by others, including her social media assistant. Moreover, because Tati is a highly recognizable figure for her own public safety, she often will post at random times when she is not in the reference location, so the public does not know exactly where she is at a particular time. There you go. That is the jurisdictional argument of Tati and James Westbrook in opposition to the motion to dismiss. There is a lot more to this document. It is 27 pages long and has another 73 pages of attachments. We're not going to go through all of that right now. This video is already long enough. But I wanted to give you guys an idea of what the jurisdictional argument is, why it matters, what's at stake, and what the argument is over. All right. So as a recap, Tati and James Westbrook and Halo Beauty Partners LLC, which is a Nevada limited liability company, they have to show that the court in the Western District of Washington, the Seattle court in the United States federal system, has jurisdiction to hear the case. And how they're getting there is called diversity jurisdiction. They're saying that all of the parties, plaintiffs and defendants, are not in the same state. No plaintiffs are in the same state as any defendants. It's called complete diversity, and it is required for diversity jurisdiction of the court. And the case or controversy has to be in excess of $75,000. Now, they've alleged damages of $5 million, so we're well above that $75,000 threshold. All right. And they are in Washington. Halo Beauty Partners is in Nevada. And Katie Joy Paulson is in the state of Minnesota. All right. Now, they are alleging complete diversity, well over 75,000. So that covers the subject matter jurisdiction, so long as none of that is found to be untrue. Next, we have to go on to personal jurisdiction over the defendants, Katie Paulson and Without a Crystal Ball. Now, Katie Paulson and Without a Crystal Ball are in Minnesota. They are in Washington. They're in a Washington court. Washington court has to have enough authority to reach into Minnesota and exercise jurisdiction over them, and they are arguing a couple different things. General jurisdiction. They're saying that Katie has sufficient forum contacts with Washington state that she is generally under their jurisdiction. They're trying to do this through a couple things. Her acts of reaching into the forum to get information about the Westbrooks. They're saying that she is accessing and benefiting from the state of Washington's public records database, and public records are owned by the state, sort of. They're maintained by the state. They're controlled by state statute, and access to them is a function of the state government. So they're saying that that is a forum contact. The other forum contacts they're arguing are that she has subscribers that she knows are located in the state of Washington. They have declarations from different people to support that there are Washington residents amongst Without a Crystal Ball subscriber base. And not only that, there is one that kind of makes an argument that one is an agent of Katie. That one is so closely intertwined that she acts on behalf of and at the behest of Katie Paulson. Whether or not that's true, I don't know. Doesn't really matter. These are the allegations that are being made to support the jurisdictional argument. Again, I don't think it's that strong of an argument. It's well argued, but the ultimate problem that we have is that the knowledge of consumers in a forum state does not mean that you target that forum state. You have to do specific acts to enter into the forum state. So the final part of this jurisdiction is the specific part of the personal jurisdiction where she is trying to cause damage to the Westbrooks in Washington specifically. If they can sustain this plausibly to the court, then that will be enough for jurisdiction over them. If they're saying they're trying to hurt us by defamatory statements directed to Washington to cause us damage in Washington. And most of their argument is spent presenting that Katie Paulson is well aware of their Washington residency, that they have a long history with the state, and because of that, that she is intentionally trying to do damage to them where they live. Is this enough? I don't know. That'll be in the hands of the judge. Personally, I don't think it is. I don't think it is. It doesn't mean the judge won't find jurisdiction. This is not a legal prediction. It is my personal feel that generally there needs to be more contact, more allegations of more direct and intentional contact with the forum state, specifically related to the tortious acts, to have personal jurisdiction, which means that they need to go to the forum state and make the defamatory statements there. Like if they traveled to Washington, stayed in a hotel near the Westbrooks house or something, did a live stream, said, here I am, or I'm outside the front door of their house, and these scumbags are liars and cowards, I think that would easily show jurisdiction. Arguing that someone broadcasting generally from Minnesota about people in Washington is enough forum contacts, I think sets a dangerous precedent, and it goes against historical precedent about mass publication. So I don't think that it's enough. Plus, the Westbrooks have alternative remedies if this court does not have jurisdiction, and that would merely be to file the case in Minnesota, in federal court in Minnesota. That would give all of the jurisdictional issues that they need, unless, of course, there's not diversity jurisdiction, in which they would have to file a claim in state court in Minnesota, which would probably not be ideal since their damage was felt in Washington. But that is my opinion on this case. I will be attempting to cover more and more of the Westbrook stuff going forward. I may do some looks back at their other arguments and about other issues as we go, but this is a recent one that I wanted to make sure people saw. If you like it, share it, Tell people about it. If you hate it or like it, drop a comment in the comment section and tell me I'm stupid or smart and you love me. It doesn't matter. I would like to hear your thoughts on this, and most importantly, share it around and subscribe. Click the stupid bell, all of the stuff. If you want to have legal and political news, here you go. If you want to have news about lawsuits involving YouTubers and all of the drama that comes with it, you're in the right place. All right, guys. Peace. Peace.